Welcome back everybody, Ollie here at the Crafty Whisk. Today I am doing 2-for-1 cards using a die from Simon Says Stamp. The die is called Holiday Stack and it came out in 2022. So the one that I'm showing you right now is for a card swap that I was participating in. So I made a whole bunch of those ones, but all the other ones that I'm going to show you, I've used the die once and created 2 cards out of the one die. I'll explain it a little bit more as we get into it. But basically I'm using the negative and the positive of each each cut of the die. And I've managed to create some very different cards. Like they're different from each other and they're very versatile. And one of them is a little bit more interactive, you might say. It's a shaker card, so it's a little bit more fun. But without further ado, let's get stuck into the first pair, shall we? So here's the die. Simon Says Stamp actually packages them in little envelopes, which is really handy because then they don't get lost all over your craft room. And for the first pair of cards, I'm going to be using some of their holographic rainbow paper, and I'm also going to be using some gold cardstock, which is already adhesive backed. It's glitter and it's also a matte gold, and I've used these ones just to show you how to use an adhesive backed cardstock for this kind of application. They're really easy to use, considering it is a very fiddly process what I'm going to be going through. Now, I'm not going to lie, these particular cards did take a red hot minute because there is a lot involved in the actual die. It's all words, it all had to be straight. So this is not a card that you would rush out and do. It's one that you're sort of going to sit there and make a few of at the same time. Now, normally when we die cut, we save paper. So we would put it on the edge like I've done just there. But because I want to get 2 cards out of the one die cut, I'm actually going to trim my cardstock down to a base card size. This one I think was from memory 5.5 by 4.25. The card swap ones I did were an Australian measurement of 14.8 by 10.5. So I can't really remember which measurements are which, but it's basically a card base. So I'm going to center the die in my card paste, the card panel. And you can get all technical and use a T-square ruler to make sure it's all straight. But because there's so much going on, I don't think you're really going to notice if it's dead straight or not. Now, with the adhesive backed cardstock, I did have to run it through 3 times. And you can see it's still pretty much stuck in there. It has all cut, it's just still in the die itself. But actually most of it came out of the die and stayed in place, which is really good because now I can actually show you one of the techniques that you can use for a intricate die like this. Some people use press and seal for what I'm about to show you next. I have tried it. It depends on the cardstock. With the press and seal, it can damage your cardstock. So because I was using glitters and foiled cardstock today, I didn't opt for the press and seal because it's a little bit too tacky. So instead, I've used other low tack tapes instead. I'm just popping all of the little pieces back in there. So you can use painter's tape, which is a low tack tape, which is what I was going to use, but I then thought for the next card I'm going to make from this die, I need to be able to see where all the letters are. So I've just used the Easy C low tack tape. And I must try and get some more of that. It's a bit tricky to get here in Australia. I've normally got to order it from the US. And then it comes at a not so nice price tag for tape. But, if it works, it works. So you just got to deal with it. So I'm just going line by line rather than the whole front, all the letters all at once. I don't want to do that. I want to go line by line, and you'll see why a little bit later. So I found it easier, because it's on glitter cardstock, which has a lot of texture to it, I found it easier to flip the panel upside down and then just poke each letter out onto the tape with my pokey tool. You can use anything really. You can use the end of a pencil because it's the back. You're not going to see it. I've used here my Creative Memories multi-purpose tool. I used a couple of various different things. So that took a few minutes, I'm not going to lie. It did take a few minutes, but you are left with this beautiful Christmas tree. And I'm going to back it onto the holographic, rainbow holographic card stock from Simon Says Stamp. And then I'm going to also use some matte gold. This one was actually from Crafter's Choice. It's not adhesive backed, and neither is this rainbow hologram. They're normal metallic cardstocks. And I'm also going to trim down my front panel so that everything is layered nicely. And don't throw away these little bits. They are perfect trims for other cards. So with the cardstocks that are sort of like foiled or glossy, I just run over it with a cloth to get all the fingerprints off of it, because they do show up. It won't show up so much in this case because it's underneath another piece of card, but it is always a good idea just to brush all your fingerprints off. Now remember, I said this particular glitter cardstock was adhesive backed. So I've just pulled off the protective sheet, and I'm going to use my Misty without the foam pad in there to line up these two pieces of cardstock so that it's easier, because once the sticky has stuck, it is stuck. It's really hard to get off without damaging the cardstock underneath. It's looking pretty good already, and it's not finished yet. Now we need to put all those little fiddly things, the centre of the A, the centre of the O, the centre of the R. They've all got to come back on to the card. Now remember, they are adhesive backed in this case, so this drove me a little bit bonkers because I had to take the adhesive off the back of the tiny pieces. But the end product, it was worth it. Look at that. I love it. It looks so simple, but we know it wasn't. Well, it was. It was just time consuming. And that's how it's going to look when it's backed onto the brushed gold cardstock. Now you can use double-sided foam if you want a little bit of height. I am just going to use score tape. And the reason I'm using score tape today is because I'm using different kinds of cardstock. Glitter cardstock it's really hard to adhere things to glitter cardstock. So I've just opted for tape all the way. And this is my little trick with score tape. I use it in my albums when I make albums, just so that it's easier to get things square. You just pull off half of it and bend it, and then you have time. You pop it down over the top of your base card. You've got a little bit of wiggle room to get it down correctly, and then you just peel off the rest of the backing papers. So easy. Glue also gives you that option, but some of these cardstocks don't react well to glue, especially the foiled cardstocks. So now we have all of those little letters that we put on tape. Remember that? And this is the backing from the adhesive cardstock. So I'm going to use that as a template to pop all the letters in. Now remember, the letters are adhesive backed as well. So you just got to peel off the little bit of adhesive, the backing paper on all your letters. And yes, that was fiddly as well, but it's also worth it. So once you've got the backing off, told you it was going to be fiddly. It's fiddly. But once you've got it off, the letters should be in the correct placement to go down. Now, because I'm using a template, it didn't matter quite so much, but if you were freehanding this on a card, then putting it on the tape is where it comes in really, really handy. And that took me about 10 minutes. And then all you have to do is take off your template and take it off carefully, because those letters are the exact same size as the holes in your template. So some of them might be a little bit stuck, so you might need your pokey tool or any kind of tool just to make sure that the letters don't come off with the backing paper or with a template. Depends what you're going to be using. It is a little bit fiddly again, but it's not too bad, and the end result is great. And I've just opted for a plain green backing. And look at that. And burnish it from the back so you don't move any of those letters that you've just spent all that time getting down straight. And I'm going to put that onto the same glitter cardstock so it all matches in. And again, I'm using the tape because it's the easiest I've found to stick things down to glitter. The same trick, peeling it off halfway, putting it down, and then taking off the backing papers. Easy peasy. And there we have our pair of cards from one single die cut. Okay, this next one, I've used metallic cardstock. I just got this from Kmart. And it is really, really pretty. And this is die cut and bond, which is basically double-sided adhesive, but it's quite wide. So I'm going to make my own adhesive backed paper here. It is really sticky, super, super sticky. I have not yet found an easy way to apply this to the cardstock. It doesn't go on straight, but that doesn't matter because no one's going to see it. You're basically using it for its double stick properties. And for the gap there, I'm just using some score tape. You can use any double-sided tape here, it doesn't matter. Now this will make it thicker than the already adhesive backed cardstock I was using before. So it will need a few run-throughs your die cutting machine. Again, I'm going to center it because I want to make 2 cards from this. And I'm going to pop it through my machine at an angle. And the reason for this is if you always put dies through the same way through your machine, at some point in time, it's not going to cut through properly through the center of the machine or the sides, depends where you do it. So I always tend to try and maneuver my dies so that they're not always the same way. They go through at an angle, sideways, whatever. So this one, I am not saving the letters. This is the cards that I'm using for my card swap, and it's Christmas themed. So I am putting all the letters that are coming out into a little container, except for the A, O, an R because we need the center of all those a little bit later. But all the other letters I'm putting straight into a little container. I'm not going to use them today, but I will use them at some stage. So I'm going to pop them into a little Ziploc bag and pop them in with the original die so that I can use them as layering pieces. And because they've already got adhesive on them, it's easy as. You can just layer them so you can go 3 layers high and create a whole new version of this card. I didn't have time to do that for today's tutorial because it was already long enough as it was, and I really didn't want to go up over the half hour if I didn't have to. So I'm putting it onto my sticky mat and I'm going to emboss it. My sticky mat does need resticking, and I'll show you in a future video how to restick your mats. It's really easy. Nothing goes to waste here. I reuse everything that I possibly can. Now I'm using a red rubber stamp, so I have not got the foam pad in my MISTI. It's just the sticky mat onto the base of my MISTI. So as you can see, my sticky mat isn't very sticky. So I'm actually going to stick the cardstock down with it really, really fine along the edge there, along the top edge. And I'm going to be clear embossing this. So I'm just using my Versamark pad. And the embossing powder that I'm using is from Wow, and it's the Clear Gloss Superfine. I didn't want the embossing to stand out. It was not the main feature of the card, but with the card swap, something has to be stamped. So this added that little bit of elegance to the card. It was very subtle, but really pretty. And the stamp that I used, I don't think I said what that was from. That was Simon Says stamp, 6x6 leaves and berries. So it is a Christmassy kind of stamp. Now I forgot to use my little embossing buddy. So I do have a few little bits of embossing out of the sticking where they're not meant to stick. In all the future card panels that I did use it, but for this one I didn't. But it doesn't really matter because it's such an overall pattern anyway that you're not going to notice if there's a little bit of clear embossing where there's not meant to be clear embossing. So I'm just using my heat tool and I'm just trying to melt in one area so I can actually pick it up with my fingers. It did take a little while. There's actually a fair bit of embossing on there. And once it goes from that white powdery look to a glossy sheen, you can see it happening there at that angle. That's how you know your embossing powder has melted. I'm just going all through the center of the letters just to make sure there's no little bits left. So I did this like a production line. I did all my bases, and then the next step I did them all at once. So it was just much easier to do it in a production line, much quicker. So I'm going to be using a few different, I only used the glitter out of one of these pads, but you can get it in pastel or bright. I used the bright, and it's from Memory Box, and it was the Glitzy Glitter pad. And I'm just trimming all these down, so I'm trying not to waste too much of it. So I'm cutting it down to roughly the same size as the card panel. And these are Australian sizes in this one. And I have measured how high the letters are. So I know roughly how much or the width I need to cut all the glitter card at. Off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. I think it was like 1.1 inches. And it just happened to work out that it was, see that little metal strip on my guillotine? It was just over that. That was the width I needed. So I'm not going to bore you cutting them all out. As you can see, that was my last one there. So that's all the colours that I'm using. And I'm just checking they're all the right size. Yes, they are. There's a few bits sticking over. Don't worry, we're going to sort that out in a minute. But I did need a little bit of cardstock down the bottom, which I have to cut in a minute. So to make sure they're all lined up nice and straight, I'm just going to pop them onto some double-sided, sorry, it's not double-sided, it's just painter's tape, so the low-tack tape. And I've just curled the tape under itself so it's sticking to my craft mat, and I can easily then stick my little strips down onto the tape, which makes it much easier to move around and trim. So now I'm just using a little bit of scrap card. I've been doing some die cutting and I've kept all my little offcuts because you never know when little things like this come in handy. Now, I don't keep every scrap. These happen to be sitting in my little, I've got like a little plastic container next to me where I keep all of the rubbish as I'm going along for the day. And they happen to be sitting in there. I thought, well, actually, it's perfect. It's the right thickness of card. I think it was about 110 pounds or 300 GSM. So I thought, beautiful. I'll use that. Nothing goes to waste. So I know now that I need to cut some off. And I didn't account for the tape on there, but that's okay. There's a workaround. You just fold it around because it's not going to be permanently stuck on there. It's only low tack tape. So now I can quite happily trim all my glitters down and keep all those little bits. They're really good for in shaker cards or little stars or, you know, anything like that. They're small, yes, but they're handy. And now that will fit beautifully on that. So remember we made our own adhesive backed card. Now we can take off the protective backing. It got a little bit stuck there because I overlapped the tapes a little bit, but that's okay. And that score tape is really stuck down. There we go. Now, there's no leeway with adhesive backed cardstock. Once it sticks down in one little spot, it's there. It's not coming off without ruining something. So I've popped glue on, and that is just to give me maneuvering room if I get it down wrong. See, I've had to adjust it a little bit. If I didn't have the glue on there, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I'm burnishing from the back because the front has got those little delicate openings, so you don't want to damage anything there. And there you go. Wasn't very hard to do at all, and it is really effective. I've stuck it down to the base, and now we get those little letters out with the little fiddly bits, which are, remember, they've got adhesive on the back of them. So we need to take off that little bit of adhesive. Yes, it's a pain. Luckily, my R piece stayed in my R, so I could just pop the whole R down. So I knew that that little centre bit was going to be in the right place. There you go. I'm not going to make you watch me do all of them. Through the magic of television, ta-da! It is done. Okay, so now we're getting to the foil card. I'm not going to bore you with putting it through the machine. I did not back this one with adhesive. I thought I will show you how to use the glue. And this foil paper was sticky is not the right word, but it really didn't want to come out of the paper at all. So this one I'm going to turn into a shaker. So to start doing that, I need my red line tape. This tape is the best I found to adhere the acetate down to the back of the front of the card. It is really, really strong adhesive. Although because I have a lot of static in my body, those little red strips, I end up wearing them for the rest of the day. They just appear out of nowhere on my clothes. It's frustrating. Alrighty, I've trimmed the acetate to be just a fraction smaller than the front of the card. But if it does come over the sides, don't worry, you can trim it off. It's clear, so it's not going to make a huge impact if there's a little bit on the side. And I'm also going now to put double-sided foam down. I'm using a low loft one. This one's from Heffy Doodle. And you need to pop it all around the perimeter, or this, I like to put it all around the perimeter so that the card looks nice. And then I pop it all into where I don't want the little shaker elements to be. Then you go over the sides of the double-sided foam because they're still a bit sticky with embossing, your embossing mate. So you can use either the pouch or the tool that I've got there. Rabbit Hole Design also makes one. It's just so that it doesn't get really sticky, and then the glitter will stick to this foam tape and won't actually shake. And I've just popped some multicolored little stars in there. And now it's just a matter of taking all of the backing off of the foam tape. And then I'm doing my trick again with the edge bits. I'm pulling halfway off and popping glue on all the foam so I have wriggle room in case it goes down wrong. And spoiler alert, it did go down wrong, which is why I do this trick. I'm yet to find a foolproof way of getting this backing on straight. I tried there to line it up with my craft mat grids and I thought I did a good job. Turn it over and it's too far over to one side. So very gently, I'm just lifting it up and moving it across. If I didn't have the glue on there, I would not have been able to do that. I've lost a few sequins, yes, but that's okay. It wasn't very many. And there we go. Shaky, shaky, shaky. I love shaker cards. Let me know in the comments below if you love shaker cards as well. And all those little bits are going to go back in the tub. And now we have to put in all those little center bits. So I just pop glue down onto the acetate, and then you can use tweezers, you can use a little picky up tool. I just pop everything back on there. I'm leaving this outside of the O with the inside of the O, because once that glue has kind of grabbed a hold, you can then take the outside off because there was no glue on that. It was only in the center. And there you go. Finished. So for the pair of the card, for that one, again, I'm using the off-cut template. I'm sticking it onto my craft mat so it doesn't go anywhere. And this is going to be stuck onto glitter card. And it was a little bit tricky because I needed to use more glue than I thought I would need to use. And it took a little while for that foil cardstock to stick. In hindsight, using this foil card, I will definitely make it into a sticker paper by using the double-sided adhesive on the back of that. I found it kept lifting with the glue, so I had to pop a weight down. So every row I did, I then just moved that paper weight down and down and down. And then I left it on there while I cleaned up all of my mess, and then it was perfectly fine after that. So that is pair number 2. That's the positive and the negative with that die cut. So we actually got some very different looking cards out of that one. That's with the rainbow foil. This was my card swap using the strips of glitter card very effective. And I did the embossing on them as well. Off-backed one on silver and one on gold. This was using the foil. I didn't show this one on screen, but I just shows you what silver and blue would look like. And then this is the foil card again into a shaker and using the negatives. If you've liked this video, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.